Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we share moving stories that remind us of the power of compassion. Today's story will touch your heart as a successful millionaire's life takes an unexpected turn after a chance encounter with a young homeless girl. Stay with us as we witness how one act of kindness can change everything. It was a cold December morning in Chicago, and the city was wrapped in a blanket of frost. The wind cut through the streets, sharp and biting, making every step feel like it could freeze a person in their tracks. Adam, a middle-aged millionaire, walked briskly through the crowded downtown streets, his mind consumed with numbers and business deals. His tailored suit and polished shoes glided through the crowd, a stark contrast to the ordinary people around him. Adam's life had been built on success, on achieving everything he wanted through hard work, strategy, and, most importantly, control. He rarely paid attention to anything outside his world of business. But that morning, something caught his eye, something unusual. As he crossed a busy intersection near a Starbucks, he noticed a young girl sitting on the cold pavement, her body wrapped in tattered clothes, a small plastic cup in front of her. Her eyes, wide but tired, followed the crowd, watching as people hurried by, oblivious to her presence. She didn't speak. She didn't ask for help. She simply sat there, a silent figure in a sea of movement. Adam was about to continue on his way, just like everyone else. But something about the girl's stillness stopped him. He didn't know why, but he found himself slowing down, his gaze drawn to her. The city was full of poverty, full of people begging for change. But this felt different. For a moment, Adam hesitated, caught between the urgency of his day and the unexpected pull of compassion. He didn't stop for people like her. He didn't see them. But today, for some reason, he did. "Hi," Adam said, his voice sounding softer than he expected. He crouched down in front of the girl, trying to get her attention. "What's your name?" The girl looked up slowly, her gaze meeting his. She seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether she should answer or even acknowledge him. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "Sophia," she whispered. Adam's heart tightened. The formality of her tone, the way she called him sir, struck him. It was as if she had learned to distance herself from anyone who might offer kindness. A survival instinct born from years of neglect and hardship. He could see the weariness in her eyes, a look that said she had seen too much of the world's indifference. "What are you doing out here?" Adam asked. Before he could stop himself, he could already guess the answer, but he needed to hear it. "I'm cold and hungry," Sophia replied, her voice barely audible. Adam felt a pang of guilt, an emotion he wasn't used to. He wasn't the kind of man who got involved. He had built his life around control, around maintaining distance from the chaos and pain of others. But looking at Sophia, he realized how far he had distanced himself from humanity. She was just a child, sitting alone in the cold, with nothing, without thinking. Adam knelt beside her. "Come with me," he said. "I'll take you somewhere warm, get you something to eat." Sophia hesitated, her large eyes studying him with a mix of caution and disbelief. She had heard promises like this before, empty words from strangers who didn't really care. But there was something in Adam's voice, something in his eyes that made her believe him. She reached out slowly, her small hand slipping into his. Adam helped her to her feet, and together they walked to a nearby cafe. As they entered, the warmth of the place was a stark contrast to the cold that had gripped them outside. Adam ordered a bowl of hot soup and a sandwich, placing the food in front of Sophia. She stared at the steaming meal in front of her, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Are you feeling better?" Adam asked gently. "Try not to push her too hard." Sophia nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the table. She didn't speak much, as if the words were stuck somewhere deep inside her. Adam could see that she was struggling with something, but he didn't want to pressure her. After a long silence, Sophia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been really tough," she said, her eyes filling with sadness. "My dad, he left after a fight with my mom. I heard her crying, and then he was just gone. He took me with him to the city. But after a few days, he left me here." Adam's chest tightened as she spoke. The pain in her voice echoed something in him, a memory he had long buried. Abandonment. The feeling of being left behind. Adam knew what it was like to grow up with that weight, to feel like no one was ever there when you needed them the most. He felt an unexpected connection to this little girl, someone so unlike him, yet so painfully familiar. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Adam said quietly. He didn't know what else to say. He couldn't change what had happened to her. But in that moment, he knew he had to do something. As they sat together in the warmth of the cafe, the reality of their lives couldn't have felt further apart. Adam had built his life on wealth and success, while Sophia had built hers on survival, one day at a time. But here, in this small cafe, they shared something that transcended all the differences between them: human connection. For the first time in a long while, Adam realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than just business deals and profits. And for Sophia, it was the first taste of kindness she had known in a long time. She didn't have to worry about where her next meal would come from or how long she would have to wait before someone noticed her. In that moment, she was seen. And for once, that was enough. Adam led Sophia down the busy street, guiding her away from the crowd and toward a small cafe a few blocks away. The wind still cut through the air, and Sophia pulled her jacket tighter around her. Shivering, she moved carefully, almost as if she wasn't used to being cared for, like she was afraid that any moment Adam might walk away and leave her on her own again. But Adam didn't let go of her hand, and as they approached the warmth of the cafe, he gave her a reassuring smile. The bell above the door jingled softly as they stepped inside, and the warmth of the room immediately wrapped around them. Adam guided Sophia to a quiet corner, far from the other customers, and asked the waitress for 2 bowls of hot soup and a couple of sandwiches. As he settled into his seat, he watched Sophia carefully, trying to gauge what she was feeling. She hadn't said much since they left the sidewalk, but he noticed the way her eyes flicked around the cafe, as though she was unsure of where to focus or who to trust. When the waitress set the steaming bowls in front of them, Sophia's eyes lit up for a brief moment. She hesitated, her small hands shaking as she picked up the spoon. Adam watched her, his heart tightening as he realized how starved she must have been, not just for food, but for care and attention, for someone to treat her like she mattered. "Are you feeling any better?" Adam asked softly, his voice low, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the fragile moment. Sophia didn't answer immediately. She lifted the spoon to her lips, took a small sip of the soup, and then set it back down, staring into the bowl as if lost in thought. Adam didn't push her. He knew better than to ask too many questions too soon. Sometimes silence was the best way to let someone open up when they were ready. After a few moments, Sophia looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the food, for helping me." Adam nodded, giving her a small smile. "You don't have to thank me. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Sophia's lips quivered as if she wanted to say more, but she held back. Adam noticed the tension in her, the way she seemed to retreat into herself, as if every word she spoke carried a weight she couldn't put down. He leaned forward slightly, trying to keep his voice gentle. "You don't have to be afraid, Sophia. I'm not going anywhere." Sophia's eyes welled up with tears, and for a moment, Adam feared she might break down in front of him. But she took a deep breath, blinking away the tears, and finally spoke again. "It's just, I haven't had anyone care about me in a long time. My mom, she tried. She did what she could." But her voice faltered, and she bit her lip, looking down at the soup again. Adam could feel the weight of her words. His mind raced back to his own childhood, his father, the pressures of achievement, the constant feeling of never being enough. He had been so focused on his own success that he'd ignored the fact that people around him were also suffering, struggling with their own battles. But Sophia was different. She wasn't looking for money, or shelter, or even pity. She just wanted someone to see her, to listen. "What happened to your mom?" Adam asked gently, his tone careful. Sophia wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. She tried to protect me, but my dad left us. One day, they fought, and I heard my mom crying. After that, He just took me with him. We went to the city, but he left me here, alone." Her words were barely above a whisper, but they carried a deep sorrow that Adam could feel in his chest. He hadn't expected to hear such a story. But it wasn't just the pain that struck him. It was the way Sophia had already learned to shield herself from the world. It was in the way she spoke, as if she had made peace with her abandonment. Adam's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," he said quietly. "I don't know what to say." Sophia shook her head, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to say anything. It's just, I'm used to it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the cafe filled the silence, and Adam realized that, for once, he wasn't thinking about his business or his next meeting. He wasn't focused on the things that usually consumed him. He was just sitting there, listening to this young girl's painful story, trying to make sense of the connection between them. Adam leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the world lift slightly. "You're not alone now," he said, his voice firm but kind. "I'll help you. You don't have to stay on the streets anymore." Sophia's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't pull away. "But why are you helping me?" she asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. Adam smiled softly. "Because everyone deserves help, Sophia. And right now, it's your turn." She looked down at her soup, her fingers tracing the rim of the bowl. For a moment, Adam thought she might push him away again, but then she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I don't know how to trust people anymore," she said, almost apologetically. Adam nodded. "I understand, but trust takes time. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long while, Adam believed it. He wasn't just offering help to ease his conscience. He was offering something real, something that had been missing from his life for too long. Sophia continued to stir her soup absent-mindedly, her fingers wrapped tightly around the spoon. Adam watched her, his mind swirling with thoughts. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy. It wasn't just the weight of the room, but the weight of everything she had been through. He could see the guarded look in her eyes, the look of someone who had been let down too many times, someone who had learned not to trust. It reminded him of his younger self, before success had come to define him, before he had buried his own heart under layers of ambition. After a long moment, Adam spoke again, his voice soft. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to, but I'm here if you want to talk. I've got time." Sophia's eyes flicked up at him, searching his face for any hint of judgment or doubt. She seemed to find none. Instead, she gave a small nod, then looked down at her hands, still gripping the spoon tightly. "My dad, he left us when I was little," Sophia began, her voice shaky. "It wasn't always like this. We had a house. I remember it was warm, and there were days when my mom would make breakfast, and everything felt safe." She paused, her lips trembling as she fought to hold back the tears. "But one night, they fought. I don't even know what it was about. My mom was crying, and then he just left, took me with him. But a few days later, he just abandoned me, left me here in the city, with no one." Adam's chest tightened at her words, the pain in her voice, the vulnerability that she could no longer hide, hit him like a punch in the gut. He could feel the ache that had been with him for years, the loneliness of growing up in a family that was broken, the yearning for a father's approval that had never come. It was something he had buried deep within himself, tucked away behind his business deals and polished suits. But hearing Sophia's story, he couldn't help but feel the rawness of his own past resurfacing. "I'm sorry," Adam said softly, his voice full of empathy. "That must have been so hard." Sophia nodded, but she didn't look up. "I didn't know what to do. I kept hoping he'd come back for me. Maybe he'd take me home, and everything would be okay again. But he never did. I don't even know where he is now." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just ended up here, alone." Adam felt a familiar pang of regret. He understood that feeling of abandonment all too well, the feeling that everything could fall apart in a moment, that people you loved could leave without a trace, leaving you to pick up the pieces. He had been in that place before, maybe not in the same way, but the loneliness, the ache of being overlooked, was something he knew too well. "Do you know, when I was about your age," Adam said, his voice distant with memory. I felt a lot like you do now. My father, he never really understood me. He always pushed me to be better, to do more. But no matter how much I achieved, it was never enough for him. I spent my whole life trying to prove myself to him. But in the end, he was never proud of me. And I carried that weight with me for years, thinking that if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, I would finally feel like I mattered. Sophia looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes searching his face. Do you still think that way? Adam shook his head. No. I realized that no amount of success would ever fill that void. It was never about what I did. It was about who I was. And now, I realize that we can't always control what happens to us, or who leaves us, but we can choose how we move forward. Sophia looked down at her lap. Deep in thought, Adam could see the wheels turning in her head, the way she was processing what he had said. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she didn't have to carry the burden of the past forever. She didn't have to define her future by what had been done to her. Adam leaned forward, his voice steady. Sophia, I want you to know something. I don't know what the future holds for you, but you don't have to do this alone. I'm not asking you to put your trust in me all at once, but I want to help. I want to make sure you have the chance to start over, to heal, and to build something better for yourself. Sophia looked at him, her face still etched with uncertainty, but there was something in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Hope, maybe, or the beginnings of it. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Why do you care? Adam smiled softly, though there was a sadness in his eyes. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like no one is there when you need them the most. But I also know that sometimes, all it takes is one person, one moment, to change everything. And I think we both deserve that moment. Sophia blinked, trying to hold back tears. She didn't have the words to express how she felt. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone. Adam had offered her something more than just food or a warm place to sit. He had given her a sense of worth, a possibility, as they sat together in that quiet cafe, sharing a simple meal. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a bond forged in the shared pain of the past and the hope for a different future. Adam knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy for Sophia, and he didn't have all the answers. But in that moment, he promised himself that he would be there for her, in whatever way he could. And for the first time, Sophia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Thank you for watching today's story. We hope it inspired you to open your heart and see the world through a different lens, where kindness can make all the difference. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the beauty of human connection.